I made a previous video on New Year's Eve about asserting sovereignty over the empty self, and very shortly after that I started thinking about making a follow-up titled something along the lines of sovereignty and right posture. So since then I've been thinking various things I want to say on that topic, some of which I'll probably forget, but never mind, let's see what happens. What's the first thing I want to say? Where to start? I watched one or two videos coincidentally on YouTube in the new year by modern day masters of Okinawan Goju-ryu, which is the style of karate that I was practicing when I went to Japan, and I trained under Sensei Moro who's continued to have a big influence on my practice, because he was a teacher that would really practiced what he preached when it came to, he used to say keiko ga suki. It means I like training. He loved training. He was really devoted to training. So a fantastic example of a strong individual devoted to his own training, as well as, of course, of helping other people along the same path. But I was already thinking about the problem, I think all the time, about the problem of right posture, when I saw a couple of videos by these modern day karate masters who naturally enough became interested in Zen, because they're in Japan training, and they're aware of the influence of Zen on Japanese culture. And so I heard it said that the Zazen, which means sitting Zen, which is about posture and breathing, and then there's Sanchin, the first kata, the most fundamental basic kata of Okinawan Goju-ryu Karate Do. Now Sanchin is more active Zen, the conventional wisdom is. So there's sitting Zen, which is about posture and breathing, and then the Sanchin, which is moving Zen, more active Zen. Well, of course, this is bullshit, total and utter bullshit. And what it comes from, the misconception comes from Japanese society has a tendency to put form before content. I think Master Dogen was aware of that tendency even back in his day. He wasn't a huge fan of his own Japanese culture. He looked up to China, and more than that, he looked up to India. I've got a strong suspicion that if he lived in modern times with access to internet and everything else, then he would study Sanskrit and Pali. And if he did that, even Master Dogen might have a deeper understanding of emptiness in terms of causality, that is, dependent arising, which isn't really clearly emphasised in Shobogen, so it's there in the background. It's similar really with F.M. Alexander. The Alexander work is really the practical implication of emptiness. It's full of the practical implication of emptiness. So when F.M. Alexander said there's no such thing as being right, or there's no such thing as right posture, but there is a right direction. So that's the practical implication of emptiness. There's no such thing as being right. So being right is a non-empty conception, and so is right posture a non-empty conception. So emptiness, which is like a remedy against all views, once you understand emptiness, you immediately see that they're thinking that Zazen is about right posture, static, and Sanshin is more active Zen. No, that's bullshit. That's totally bullshit. But it's not your fault that you believe such bullshit, because that's what Zen masters in Japan believe, and that's what they teach, because they don't study emptiness. Now, going back to the more positive side of the equation, having dispensed with right posture, this, I'm going to talk my own book now, this Asvaghosa's Gold, the second edition, is available on Amazon, thanks to the efforts of Mike Latchford, who enabled me to have a second bite of the cherry. The second edition of Asvaghosa's Gold was published in May of this year, and I must say I feel very satisfied with it, very happy, because the first time round, before studying Nagarjuna's MMK, I hadn't begun to see how fundamental in Asvaghosa's teaching too was emptiness. So if we read Canto 17 of Soundarananda, if you read it again in the second edition, hopefully I've brought out much more clearly how Nanda only attained the first fruit of Dharma, the fruit of stream entry. He only understood that as he began to understand emptiness. So to enter the stream is to overcome the first three fetters, which is Atmadrishti, which is a view of self. So of course that is directly negated by emptiness, because the teaching of emptiness, as it relates to the self, is that there is no such thing as a separately existing self. So, which is not to say that I'm not happening as I sit here waffling. It's to deny that I exist here separately. Everything, me happening and what I'm saying is all dependent on what's not me. If there's any truth in what I'm saying, it doesn't come from me, it comes from the Buddha's teaching, from the teaching of Alexander, and since we're talking about Asvaghosa's Gold, from Asvaghosa's efforts to transmit that teaching. So, stream entry. Atmadrishti is number one, fetter, that emptiness overcomes. Number two is vichikitsa, doubt. So in Shobo Genzo, there's a chapter called Shinjin Inga, which means deep belief, absolute belief in cause and effect. The problem with that title, though, is that cause and effect only sort of bolsters our Western idea that what is the effect of certain causes, whereas the teaching of emptiness is that what's happening is dependently arisen. So it's causally arisen. It's arisen from conditions, if you like. It's conditionally originated. But there's no separate cause or no separate condition. Things happen unfathomably. It's not even that see, as part of the sort of Tavistock psyop, we're all encouraged to think of systems being complex. And what that does is tends to detract from the intention of the imperialist British creators of the Tavistock psyop, who want us to think about complex reality and not notice whose intention is pulling the strings behind everything. Because once you understand emptiness, it brings into the picture more clearly the importance of human intention. So at the moment, that the way I was educated to think was more in terms of, here I am existing in the world, and the world is governed by like Newtonian mechanics or Einstein's relativity, something like that. But in light of emptiness, there's no separation between me and the world. So once that's understood, it gives a greater strength, a greater understanding of the power of our own intentions in the whole thing. And also you could say the vulnerability of our intentions to be influenced by malign external conditions, like Tavistock conditioning, for example. So, coming back again to doubt, cause and effect doesn't really, the scientific view of cause and effect doesn't actually get to the root of doubt. It still leaves us with a doubt about where we fit into the picture. But emptiness removes that doubt. MMK says, Ya pratitya samutpadam pashyatidam sa pashyati dukam samudayam chaiva nirodham margam evacha. So he who sees dependent arising sees this: suffering, its coming together, its cessation, and the path. So if you understand emptiness, also known as dependent arising, you understand the Four Noble Truths. And that is, to understand the Four Noble Truths is not to have a doubt about what the Buddha taught. So again, the second fetter, vichikitsa, doubt, depends on emptiness. It's understood. Doubt is removed in light of emptiness. Then the third fetter is shila vrata upadana, clinging to shila, good habits or integrity, discipline, and vrata, vows of practice. So that comes back to what F.M. Alexander said. You see, he encouraged us to, like, being wrong is the best friend you've got. Being prepared to be right, being prepared to be wrong is the golden key. There's no such thing as being right. So that's pure emptiness. Even though FM didn't call it that, he intuitively understood that to be free, we had to get rid of that idea of wanting to be right, clinging to good habits or virtue, clinging to virtue and vows, for a euphonic rendering. Clinging to virtue and vows, in Alexander jargon, is trying to be right. So again, the real solution to trying to be right is understanding emptiness. So when I used to have a blog, you can find it still on mining, nothing but the lifeblood .blogspot.com. Or was it just .blogspot? Anyway, if you search Mike Cross mining Asvaghosa's gold, you'll find it under that URL. And I used to have a tagline: mining Asvaghosa's gold, and the tagline was digging out the meaning of kāñcanam, āsanam. So kāñcanam means gold and āsanam means seat, literally a golden seat. But that's a metaphor for zazen. So golden seat or golden sitting. Asana means literally, it's a verbal noun ending in na, is an ing word, a gerund. So it's literally a golden sitting. Asana means sitting, and from that it means a seat. So in Soundarananda, or is it Buddha Charita? I can't remember. Asvaghosa is ostensibly describing a golden throne, but in the hidden meaning, he's talking about true sovereignty. That's what I wanted to bring kāñcanam āsanam into it, because it relates to this whole business of sovereignty. So I didn't understand. Well, I knew I was digging out the meaning of kāñcanam āsanam. I didn't realise how emptiness can inform our understanding of what golden sitting is. See, again in MMK, Nagarjuna says, we can't understand nirvana, we can't attain nirvana except by relying on the ultimate truth of emptiness. So ultimately, golden sitting is letting go of everything, letting go of ideas of right posture, letting go of all kinds of clinging. And we can't do that except in light of emptiness, Nagarjuna says. So kāñcanam āsanam is real sovereignty, true sovereignty. Golden sitting is a symbol, a poetic way of expressing what we're after for ourselves so as to be able to help others. True sovereignty over the empty self, golden sitting. And it's got nothing to do with right posture. Well, it has got to do with right posture. It's got to do with letting go of the delusion that there's such a thing as right posture. It's got everything to do with direction. Just as active as Sanchin is active. It's got to do with something I haven't talked about as much recently as I used to when I was helping children with dyslexia and dyspraxia. It's got to do with 4 reflexes. So making a friend of those 4 reflexes, I think, begins in Zazen with the instruction Kanki Isoku in Fukan Zazengi. Kanki means starve yourself of oxygen. Isoku for 1 breath. So, thinking about the 4 primitive reflexes, each of which corresponds to one of Alexander's directions. The first Alexander direction is let the neck be free. And that's related a lot with the Moro reflex. Because if your primitive fear reflex is overstimulated, everything tenses up around the neck and shoulders. So really, for the neck to be free, you have to be free of that kind of deep level of fear. And one way you can do that is what I just did there, is starve yourself of oxygen, and what you're doing there is eventually you can feel the gasp reflex wanting to kick in. So if you can just be cool with that and just sit there and kind of observe in a friendly way, not. It's the same with going into icy water, as I was just doing half an hour or so ago. It's just above minus at the moment here by the forest. So if you get into freezing cold water, that you've got a kind of a choice there. You can either go, kind of react to it in a kind of panicky way, or you can just say, no, I'm fine with this. So you can actually choose not to go down the path of stiffening your neck and following the sort of the Moro pathway. You can actually make a friend of the stress, in which case it's a whole different kettle of fish than if somebody's imposing stress on you. So that's something I realised when in family trips to the Lake District, before I was even 10, I was quite proud of my ability to get in the cold. We'd stop by the Lake Windermere, say, and I would go for a dip in the cold lake. I think it's a bit of a family tradition. My grandfather in Wales used to do that as well. And I understood that if you just relaxed and surrendered to the cold, you get this kind of rush of warmth. And that was the way to do it. Well, it was an early kind of insight really into how to cope with the Moro reflex, how to make it your friend rather than your enemy. So then that's the Moro reflex, and in Alexander work it's related with let the neck be free. And then when we do a deep bow, that's related with a reflex called a tonic labyrinthine reflex, or the baby balance reflex. So if you do a bow and keep your spine kind of lengthening, that inhibits two kind of responses for the tonic labyrinthine reflex. One is a flexion response as your head goes forward, and one is an extension response as your head goes back. So if you don't do either of those, flexing forwards or arching back, as you stimulate the reflex by bowing, that's inhibiting the tonic labyrinthine reflex. In Alexander terms, he talks about the head going forward and up. So letting the head go forward means not pulling the head back, and letting the head goes up means not flexing forward. So head forward and up is related with the tonic labyrinthine reflex. And then in Fugan Zazengi, for example, the instruction is Kanki isokushi saiyu yoshin shite, sway left and right. Well, that's related with a reflex called the asymmetric tonic neck reflex, or the baby fencer reflex. If you put a newborn baby on the floor face down, if its head goes that way, its arm will tend to go like that, and this arm will be straight, and this arm that it's facing, no, I'm sorry, other way around. It's like that. That if I'm looking to the left, the baby's arm will be stretched on the left, and it'll be like the baby fencer reflex, we call it. You see it like a basketball player uses that reflex, or a goalkeeper stretching to save a ball, shows that reflex. But generally, when if that reflex has been inhibited, or if it's been integrated, then we favour the other thing. So if we're going to sleep and that asymmetric tonic neck reflex is properly integrated, we'll tend to favour sleeping like that. And that is related, because it's a spiralic thing, it's related with what Alexander called letting the back lengthen and widen. So if the reflex is, if I've got the reflex in immature form on my left side, say, and when my head turns to the left, my body, if I want to practice as in the right posture, say, and I turn my head to the left, everything is liable to want to twist. The body wants to twist. So those patterns will still be there, even if you're practicing as and your head is to the front. Or in fact, if the reflex is immature, you probably your head won't be to the front. And so, what does the unenlightened Zen teacher in the dojo? If you see somebody sitting like this, he'd probably fiddle around and try to get the head in the right position, which is just a variation on the theme of right posture. Whereas the Alexander teacher would come up, would look at that kind of twisted tightness and say, oh, what needs to happen? The neck has to be free, the head has to go forward and up, and the back has to lengthen and widen. And that lengthening and widening is a spiralic release. It has to do with the double spiral. Raymond Dart, famous anthropologist and anatomist, recognised this. He had Alexander lessons and realised that when you've got a twist in your posture, it's a function of these two double helix like spirals. If anybody, I often recite to remind myself: left, right, left, right, left, right. Splenius capitis, spinalis, rhomboids, serratus anterior, external oblique, rectus abdominis, internal oblique. If you follow those on anatomy book, you can follow those double spirals both ways. So actually, me and Ron Collier, without being too big-headed about it, it was me and Ron Collier on Ron Collier's training course worked out or noticed that the ATNR, the asymmetric tonic net reflex, and these spirals are very much connected. It was our teacher in reflexes was Ray Evans, and Ray said that what Alexander noticed basically was what he called Moro TLR. Ray called it Moro TLR. So this kind of pattern that Alexander, neck free to let the head go forward and up, is a release of the Moro TLR kind of grasping tightness pattern. And then Ron and I, over the years, talking about reflexes on his training course, realised that let the back lengthen and widen when you think about the spirals, it's related to the ATNR, the third primitive reflex. And then the fourth reflex, let the knees, send the knees forwards and away, is related to the symmetrical tonic neck reflex, which is not actually a primitive reflex. It's a bridging reflex between the primitive reflexes and the postural reflexes. So the primitive reflex, if the baby's head is turned, my head's turned to the left arm stretches out and the right arm bends. That's the primitive reflex. Then the postural reflex is the opposite of that. That's the mature. That's what the primitive reflex evolves into. So with the Moro and the TLR, which sort of relate to the head position and the tone in the body, with those tonic neck reflexes, they're primitive reflexes. The symmetrical tonic neck reflexes emerges around 6 months, when the baby if it increases extensor tone in the neck and pulls the head back, what happens is the arms stretch out and the hips and knees flex and take the baby into the cat sit position. Conversely, if it flexes its neck, it'll flex its arms and extend its legs, so its bottom will go up in the air. So that's something you often see in babies around the age of 6 months, and the explanation for it is it's exercising this symmetrical tonic neck reflex. Now, when that symmetric tonic neck reflex is immature, before it's been integrated, if a child in the classroom looks down, flexes its neck to draw or to write, as the neck flexes, the hips and knees want to extend, and so the child will stand up. So this is the child that's often diagnosed with ADD or ADHD. In our big pharma controlled world, of course, that's an opportunity to make some money by giving the child Ritalin. But what it actually needs to do is just learn how to crawl on its hands and knees, which is the Mother Nature's developmental movement for inhibiting the symmetrical tonic neck reflex. Why did I start talking about the reflexes? Golden sitting. So part of my process of finding sovereignty over myself is sending the knees forwards and away. It's there all for inhibition of all those four reflexes there in Zazen. So the Moro reflex by the hypoxic experiment, enjoying a bit of hypoxia, not gasping, not panicking. The tonic labyrinthine reflex when we do a deep bow. The asymmetric tonic neck reflex when we sway left and right. And then what I really emphasise when I'm sitting is sending my knees forwards and away. Not anything to do with posture. You see, none of those four to do with posture. They're all to do with movement and balance and direction. Especially knees forwards and away is all about direction. So, kāñcanam, āsanam, golden sitting. So we haven't really got sovereignty over ourselves if we're in the grip of those 4 reflexes. The children my wife and I worked with over many years when we still lived in Aylesbury, that work is very, very much to do with releasing children, freeing children from the grip of immature primitive reflexes. And I learnt about this from Ray Evans, my Alexander head of training. Ron and I learnt from Ray. Ray learnt largely from Peter Blythe up in INPP Chester, Institute of Neurophysiological Psychology in Chester. Peter died in 2013, but if you look on the Wikipedia for Peter Huxley Blythe, you'll find a hit piece on him, a big pharma hit piece, because what Peter understood about the reflexes was that the intervention that was required is to do with balance and movement and giving the child freedom, true sovereignty. But what the big pharma world wants is that you spend the children with dyslexia, dyspraxia should spend their lives relying on some drug or other. So if you go on Wikipedia and look for Peter Huxley Blythe, you'll find at the bottom of the article there's somebody called Dorothy Bishop who works for the Wellcome Trust, and she's just a sort of got an arrogant, sneering comment about Peter's work and his wife Sally Blythe. And I'll just say that if you click on the link to Dorothy Bishop, you can see a photograph. And to me, the photograph, it speaks more than words. Kāñcanam āsanam. So that, I was going to say something about my own experience as well, that something that might encourage people who are struggling and feeling depressed with what's going on in the economy, with interest rates going up, causing people and inflation, which has been planned. It's been planned with all the money printing that happened with the beginning of the COVID hoax. It was intended to have these effects, because the more economic stress we're under, the more we're like to fight with each other, and the more liable they think we'll be to accept central bank digital currencies when they start handing those out for free. So we're really up against people who want to exercise sovereignty over us. That's what the game is about. In response to Brexit and the election of Donald Trump in 2016, we're witnessing a backlash to that, a backlash to so-called populism, in other words, to democracy. When we had the temerity, when we plebeians had the temerity to say that we wanted to leave the European Union, and the Americans voted in Donald Trump, they couldn't stand for that. They need to get their own people back in again. So those guys want to assert sovereignty over us. Well, here's how we can assert our sovereignty over ourselves. Golden sitting. That's it. And so now, finally, I get round to the thing I wanted to say right at the beginning. What I wanted to emphasise is sovereignty, exercising sovereignty over ourselves is an indirect thing. This is what I learnt from Alexander's niece Marjorie Barlow more than anybody. See, one of the things she said to me about indirectness, she could recognise that I had a kind of missionary zeal to spread the truth of Buddhism. And she said, you can't force other people to be happy. If the Buddha's teaching is about being happy, you have to be happy in yourself, and then happiness will spread out like ripples. So sometimes living here alone by the forest, I have this kind of anxiety that I'm not actually accomplishing anything. I wake up in the morning thinking, what the hell have I done with my life? Because I've got no students really to speak of. I watch other people become kind of famous. I sacrificed a lot to translate the Shobogenzo, and that was sort of both the royalties and the credit from it were kind of stolen from me by Nishijima Sensei's other teachings, teachers who received the Dharma from Nishijima Roshi, believing in his teacher of right posture. In a way, they're all part of the, I hate to say this, but especially someone like James Cohen is very explicitly part of the system that wants to take our sovereignty away. Cohen with his upholding of the vaccine mandates and so on. So it's not that I'm free of being depressed by all that kind of stuff, but I have got the means. I get up and practice Zazen, drink my morning coffee, I feel like $1 million again to cycle out every day. In the night time and first thing in the morning, I'm usually quite gloomy, but in the sunshine, have a cold dip, drink coffee, work in the garden to warm up, drink coffee, and sit sending my knees forwards and away. So what I wanted to say about that was when I emphasise sending knees forwards and away, that's all I do really emphasise to myself, knees forwards and away. I'm conscious in emphasising that for me, there's an awful lot is contained in knees forwards and away. All my understanding of the reflexes that I got from Ray and Ron and Peter Blythe and all the previous Alexander directions, they're all in that. When I send my knees forwards and away, it's like that direction is empty of itself, but full of everything else I've been taught. So I wanted to mention that Charles Sherrington, who's the father of neurophysiology, he had a very good phrase that he wrote in his book of 1905 called The Integrative Action of the Nervous System. So he was thinking in terms of the whole. He talked of the convenient fiction of the simple reflex. So here's another person who was intuiting about the truth of emptiness from his own research. Before science became so sort of atomized, Sherrington was thinking. Sherrington actually was a supporter of Alexander's work. He talked about what Alexander had contributed in terms of treating every action as a function of the whole organism within its environment. So it's a very empty kind of conception. But very explicitly, Sherrington touched on emptiness when he said the convenient fiction of the simple reflex. This relates to the two truths that Nagarjuna spoke of: the truth of the truth of the convenient fictions of the world, which like we need. Like if I get 3 points on my license, I can't say to the judge, I can't use emptiness as a defence. My separate existence is a legal fiction, but that doesn't take away its validity at the level of conventional truth. Same with the reflexes. It's very useful to think in terms of those 4 reflexes: Moro, tonic labyrinthine reflex, asymmetric tonic neck reflex, symmetrical tonic neck reflex, the cat sit reflex. It's very, very enlightening to understand how those reflexes cause a child's unfathomable behaviour in the classroom. Why some children, when they're doing the handwriting, they get twisted into such funny positions. It's the asymmetric tonic neck reflex. The child's got right-handed, and he goes to write with his right hand. His head turns to the right, and of course the arm wants to do that, and so we've got to pull his arm in against the reflex, and that's why children who've got an immature asymmetric tonic neck reflex have trouble handwriting, and particularly they have trouble thinking and writing at the same time, because if all their attention is focused on this difficult physical task of controlling the arm, then there isn't so much attention left to think about what 2 and 2 is for. Emptiness. It informs everything once we begin to see everything in the light of emptiness. So kāñcanam āsanam, golden sitting. What I wanted to say is that, first of all, the most important thing, buy the second edition of Asvaghosa's Gold, because it's more explicitly, it'll explain to you about, in light of emptiness, we can practice bhavanam. Bhavanam means letting happen. I was already practicing letting happen before I understood that bhavanam meant letting happen, because I was already practicing letting happen what Alexander said: let the neck be free, to let the head go forward and up, to let the spine lengthen and the back widen, to let the knees go forwards and away, to let the legs release out away from the back. So Alexander work is all about letting happen. I wasn't able to make the connection from Alexander work to bhavana so clearly until I understood from Nagarjuna that bhavana literally means letting happen. Kāñcanam āsanam, the golden sitting. The way to practice golden sitting is in light of emptiness. In light of emptiness, we understand that bhavanam means letting happen. It's not about anything. It's not about right posture. It's not about being mindful of what is. It's not about being present in the now. Those are all non-empty conceptions. And emptiness is the remedy that frees us from those non-empty conceptions. And it opens the way to us to this true sovereignty over oneself, which Asvaghosa, I think, had in mind when he used the metaphor of golden sitting. And the thing I was getting around to talk about was my own experience of being a loser. You see, this is why I want to connect with people who are suffering under the yoke of this evil system, this evil Tavistock guided system that wants to exercise sovereignty over us like we were cattle. Like it's really the feudal English class. They haven't given up on wanting to control America as their colony, and they don't like uppity middle class and working class Brits trying to exercise their own sovereignty, like getting ideas above our station. And a way to combat their system is to emptiness is the key to it. They can't stop us from understanding emptiness. And understanding emptiness, we can bloody well exercise sovereignty over ourselves, letting the neck be free, to let the head go forward and up, to let the spine lengthen and the back widen, sending the fucking knees forwards and away. Yeah. if we do that, every one of us can be king of the universe. So, again, I want to talk to my own experience, because I've ended up being a loser. I'm not just saying that for rhetorical effect. I wake up every morning and I feel the biggest loser of the lot. And for one thing, before I even had a conscious memory, at the age of about 18 months, according to my medical record, I lost my left testicle to testicular torsion. A locum doctor, according to my medical record, diagnosed mumps and gave me antibiotics. So Big Pharma got a few quid out of it. But because of the when I found out about it in my early 20s, the doctor said all the doctor needed to do was to take the testicle and twist it back into place, and the pain would have gone. Instead of that, I cried apparently for 24 hours solid, and then the testicle atrophied. The pain must have gone away, and I stopped crying. So people thought, well, yeah, well done, the locum doctor. He, solved the problem. So that was my first big loss. And then when I was in my 20s, I was a big loser in love. And well, I made a big effort, even though things had really crashed and burned, and I would have been better off accepting that. I made a big effort to win my old girlfriend back. And when that also failed, when I was 26, that's when I shaved my head and really thought, fuck this, because I wasn't happy with my life in Japan apart from Zen, and I was there only for the Zen. So I thought, right, I'm going to shave my head and really throw myself into practicing Zazen. Started practicing 5 hours every day, which I carried on for 2 years, between 26 and 28. And at that time, Gudo Nishijima, he was a bit critical of me. He said that, I think there's a more realistic way than what you've chosen. So I was furious at that, because it was like I dived off the fucking diving board, and he was saying, I'm not sure that's a good idea. I'd already taken the step. I expected him to be encouraging, which actually, to be fair, he was after a while, when he realised I really meant it. But at that time, that wasn't. You see, it was like. See, when I started doing that, I really understood something on a different level about Zazen, and I really committed to it, and was practicing 5 hours a day. I really felt some kind of great happiness doing that, but it wasn't quite reliable, because it wasn't in light of emptiness. I was really going for it, but I was going for right posture. It wasn't the ultimate truth of golden sitting in light of emptiness. I mean, I was really inspired by what Master Dogen wrote in the chapter of Shobogenzo, chapter 72, Zammai or Zammai, the Samadhi, which is king of Samadhis. So I could sense from that Master Dogen was in that. He knew he was in the line of that transmission of the golden sitting from the Buddha through Asvaghosa, through Nagarjuna, through Bodhidharma, through the Zen patriarchs of China. Master Dogen, he was expressing the truth of golden sitting in that chapter. And so I could kind of sense that. But again, without the teaching of emptiness, it's not somehow not 24 karat, put it that way. So, even though you're a loser, I'm suggesting buy Asvaghosa's Gold, second edition from Amazon. And that MMK will make it, the teaching of emptiness, even clearer, but it's already in there. That's what I've been taking solace from. Even though MMK translation could be important, Asvaghosa didn't leave anything unsaid that needs to be said. I think it was more a case that Nagarjuna would have been thoroughly familiar with Asvaghosa's poetry, And what I guess what must have happened is that despite the fact that Asvaghosa clearly referred to the teaching of emptiness, people didn't understand it in the same way that I didn't understand it when the book was first published end of 2015. It took me MMK before the penny dropped that Asvaghosa was talking about emptiness. The golden sitting, the golden seat, was full of emptiness. So MMK will make everything clearer that needs to be made clearer. But for the time being, it's all in here. Everything you need to understand about kāñcanam, āsanam, which is Asvaghosa's phrase, I'm confident you can find it in there. So yeah, being the loser, then the other thing I lost is I kind of lost control of the Shobogenzo Enzo translation, and I lost my position in Nishijima Roshi's kind of little empire, because in my 20s he would talk to me about me being his successor, but that wasn't to be. So in the hierarchy of things, and towards the end of the life, he was calling me Mr. Mike Cross, and as opposed to, say, Venerable James Cohen or Venerable Brad Warner, those venerable guys who had the ceremonies to become monks or priests or whatever you call them, even though they haven't bothered to be celibate. Pretty galling for me, who struggled so hard through my 20s with celibacy, because I trying being the operative word, you know, like Yoda said, there is no try, do or do not. But I tried manfully to be celibate without success. But at least I tried, you know. I went to Thailand and lived in a temple there for a few weeks. I shaved my head, looked into it, and eventually realised I couldn't hack it. So I got married, and was no longer the loser in love in that sense. You know, I had a family, 2 great sons. But on those, I've got those experiences of being the loser. Lost my left testicle, was a loser in love in my 20s, and in my 30s and 40s, lost my position in Buddhism. Lost control of my translation, lost recognition for it. Got the likes of Jean-Marc Bazzi quoting Nishijima, saying that he regretted that he let me do the rewriting in my smart English. You know, it would have been better if he'd all done it by himself. He's totally deluded. But it's, you know, the master, the great Roshi Nishijima said it, so it must be true, people think. Does it matter? Well, it matters to me every morning. I wake up feeling miserable. But does it matter when I'm really sending my knees forwards and away? When the knees forwards and away is full of the Moro reflex being inhibited, no sign of the tonic labyrinthine reflex, freedom from the grip of the twisting ATNR, drinking coffee in the sunshine. It seems not to matter then. So there seems like, even for a loser like me, there's still a possibility of getting a glimpse every day of kāñcanam, āsanam, golden sitting. But do not call it right posture.